Okay, I think we're virtually there. Are we there? Everybody happy? Okay. Right. Welcome to Health and Wellbeing Partnership Scrutiny meeting. Nice to be back here because I've missed a few weeks, but it has been held in very good hands, and you haven't missed me, so never mind. Right. First off, any apologies?
Yes, Chair, we have apologies from Councillor Julie Cooper. Councillor Fear is substituting, is on his way. Councillor Proctor and Councillor Erin is substituting, and Councillor Burgess with Councillor Pickup substituting. Thank you. Okay. Just in case if they have forgotten, they come at 7 o'clock, we'll let them in and various other things. Right. Any declarations of interest? No. Minutes of previous meetings. Any alterations? Can I have a proposer in a second and then seeing if I wasn't here? Proposed, Mr. Cooper. Seconder. Councillor Waring. Minutes put done. Update from Cabinet. Councillor Waring. Oh, sorry.
That'll be me then.
That's you, Jill. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I haven't got any further update than the one I gave last month at the moment.
Report from Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner, page 7 to 20. Any questions on that? No. Take it as read. Yeah, take it as read. Minutes of Staffordshire Health and Care Overview Committee, which was today as well. Oh, sorry. Right, go back one. Police and Fire Commissioner, Ben Adams. There we are, mate. All yours.
Thank you. Evening, Chair. This all works. Very impressive. Thank you for asking me to come and say hello. I'm very keen to get into some questions as soon as we can and just talk about some of your local concerns with you. But just by way of introduction, just over 6 months in to this new role, very, very encouraged by everybody I've met in our police and fire and rescue service, real hardworking, dedicated individuals, and some really tremendous leaders and real commitment. And I think we saw that through the pandemic. Many of them at their stations doing what they could, not just to assist in their day job, but particularly the fire and rescue service stepping up to work alongside health in terms of vaccination, testing, and any assistance that they could provide. It's been a very busy 6 months for me. I knew when I was elected that the Chief Constable intended to retire. So we've had to embark on a recruitment exercise for the Chief Constable. Also at the same time, our Chief Fire Officer, Rebecca Bryant, who'd been with us for some time. You may have met her, tremendous servant to Staffordshire, wanted to step down and retire too. So a Chief Fire Officer as well. Pleased to announce that both those recruitment processes went extremely well. The new Chief Fire Officer who's in place is Rob Barber. He was a deputy with the service for some time. He started as a fire officer in Newcastle under Lyme. So I'm sure you'll appreciate he's nigh on perfect. Anybody who saw my first public performance meeting with him a week or so ago will really recognise the strength that Rob's got, not just strategically, but in his very, very detailed knowledge of Staffordshire. I'm delighted to be working with him. The fire service is, I think, nationally in an unusual place. The good news is fires are reducing. Demand is increasing, however, due to climate change, due to threats of floods, fires in open spaces. We had one a couple of years ago in the moorlands that burnt for weeks. Fires related to waste disposal, illegal waste disposal, and other challenges, I think, which I'm hoping that Staffordshire's Fire and Rescue Service will be one of the first to step up and say, here's a modern service that can work along all sorts of other organisations, not least the NHS, and assist them in providing a safe environment for people to live in. And with that in mind, they're looking very much to focus their prevention from now on targeting where vulnerable people are. So where people are likely not to be comfortable managing their own safety. Perhaps they've got old heaters in their house, which is topical at the minute. Perhaps they've got concerns with being able to escape a house due to mobility, and targeting that prevention work, which used to be under the Safe and Well banner, working alongside the NHS and councils to keep people safe. Now, that means a more modern, different fire service. We're embarked on a journey there to move from what was, I think, what we all believe a fire and rescue service is, into what it can be in the future. The police service also led in 2 weeks' time by a new chief constable, a gentleman by the name of Chris Noble. Chris started his career in Northern Ireland. He was commander in Belfast for a while, which, as you can imagine, is a challenge which would build anybody's experience pretty quickly. He also reorganised all of the Northern Ireland police service. He spent the last 4 years in Humberside. He's currently the lead nationally for protests. So you may have heard him or heard his Irish accent on the BBC in recent weeks talking about protests with people gluing themselves to the M25 and various other issues around the country. He's got a real ambition for Staffordshire, which very much mirrors my own, that we strengthen our local policing delivery. Police forces working in a true neighbourhood way, like they do very well here in Newcastle, understanding the community and offering a quality and informed service which varies from place to place. Staffordshire's a big place. We have common problems. Every area is suffering with domestic violence. Every area is concerned about young people. Every area is concerned about drug use, particularly drug crime. Every area has got deaths on the roads. But every area also has its own issues. In some cases, they're bordered, as we are in South Staffordshire, and most of the criminals are crossing the border, seeking to take advantage of the people living there. Here, we have some different issues. I've been lucky enough to take 2 recent tours around the town centre, both busy, both full of people looking to get ready for Christmas quite early by the looks of it, because this was a week or so ago, but also demonstrated to me some of the concerns you have where people might not feel safe because of some individuals in the subways. And whilst they weren't posing a threat to anybody at that time, I can understand why that would lead to some concerns about people coming to visit occasionally. We found only one situation and had a very good conversation about your new marshals and a very good conversation with your local policing team, who are absolutely committed to keeping everybody safe here. But the main message for me was that, as is my experience over many years, this is a good town centre to come, spend some money, go out, have a good time and enjoy yourself. So we've got a new Chief Constable, new Chief Fire Officer. I've just finished consulting on my local police and crime plan and my local fire and rescue plan. I hope you've had an opportunity to look at those and contribute to the consultation if you felt so minded. For me, there's really a stream running through there about the police needing to work effectively in partnership with other organisations if we're all to get what we want. The service is not really there to become the first port of call for somebody with a mental health crisis, but it often is. The service will respond if somebody's in distress, and they do respond, but they aren't the right person to look after someone who needs support from a health professional. So I'm very keen, and you'll see this in the plan, that we develop even stronger relationships with health, with our partners in mental health in particular, and build on some provision like we already have, where we have mental health nurses working alongside officers in our contact centre to get the best advice to people. That matters because, to give you an example, just after the lockdown, the number of calls coming into the service were similar to New Year's Eve, huge numbers. And that was a time when we still got a lot of people off isolating due to COVID. And it was an extremely difficult time. 40% of those calls were related in some way to mental health concerns. People going missing, worried that they might pose a threat to themselves, might pose a threat to others. So we need to build up that relationship ever more. Equally with young people, with the vulnerable, with those being exploited, relationships with specialist organisations, a lot of them in the third sector, who work very effectively with children, very effectively with those who are just on the edge of the criminal justice system. And similarly for me, and this is an area which I've learned very quickly about, we need to be working more effectively with the rest of the criminal justice system. Some of the, well, let's be absolutely frank, we've got a backlog in the courts, which is a serious problem now. We've got a backlog in health, we've got a backlog in courts. You can realistically wait 18 months to 2 years to get a court case at the moment. Now, if you feel your life has been put on hold because you're a victim of crime and you're waiting 2 years to see justice done, that needs to be addressed as quickly as possible. And when I look at the courts, when I look at some practice in CPS, I think it was designed for a different time. I think it needs to modernise. And I think with a mandate from the public, commissioners are in a unique place to push some of that on. The CPS, the Crown Prosecution Service, needs to work with us on things like rape convictions. Very, very low percentage of the most serious crimes not progressing to court, not progressing to conviction. And recent changes in legislation and guidance around forensics, for example, what's on someone's phone, how long it takes to get that information, what that means for the defence and prosecution is causing issues for the pace of justice. So I'm going to work very hard with those partners to see if we can improve the way we all work together to speed up court cases, speed up convictions, but also consider where court is not the most appropriate, prison or conviction is not the most appropriate course of action. We've got some well-proven opportunities now around drug treatment orders, alcohol treatment orders, working with the rest of my team in the commissioning office for services, not just to domestic violence victims, but to domestic violence perpetrators, to try and reduce the chances of offending, really reduce the chances of reoffending, because that's in all our interests. But the top line for me around my plan are the four things that people have been speaking to me about for the last 2 or 3 years. First of all, the contact of the public, or the contact the public experience with the service, needs to improve. That means 999 calls need to be responded to quicker, and 101 calls definitely need to be answered quicker. It's very complicated. It hasn't been made easier due to COVID and pandemics and everything else that meant staffing levels weren't where they needed to be. But it's absolutely essential we get this right. We're talking about trust in the police at the moment. And for me, trust goes right back to that first phone call. If you've taken the trouble to phone the police service because you're distressed or worried for yourself, or quite often for somebody else, quite often people are calling 101 because they want to pass on intelligence or they want to pass on information. They're worried about somebody else. Half an hour later, you haven't had the phone answered. You then might get the phone answered, but you might not see anybody or speak to anybody for 3 or 4 days because it's not an urgent inquiry. For me, that whole experience needs to leave the individual feeling that their situation is considered important by the police service and dealt with like it's important. So that initial contact, you will see some quite dramatic improvement there. Secondly, response, and this is the physical time to get to emergencies. There's a review at the moment about the way that the police have restructured in recent years in Staffordshire. A move away from neighbourhood police teams with locally based response teams. Response teams are the ones that will fly down the road with a blue light because there's a 999 call. At the moment, we've got 3 response hubs, and it's clear, despite the distortion of the pandemic, that has meant that far too many calls are seeing a response 45 minutes to an hour later. Not only that, can you imagine you've hurtled across half of Staffordshire with your blue light on, passing everything you can, weaving around the traffic at full tilt. You're going to arrive in a somewhat frazzled state, only to find you've got another one. So you might not be able to spend as much time dealing with the incident, dealing with the victims, dealing with the concerned party as you might want to. So there's a review of our operating model. The Chief Constable, who will be landing soon, will be looking to make some decisions about that before the end of the year. And I'm very confident that my requirement in the plan for improved response times will be met as a result of that. The third big issue is antisocial behaviour. And this is an issue right across the county. I don't think we'll get rid of antisocial behaviour. I don't think we'll stop people misbehaving occasionally. I don't think we'll stop young people concerning communities occasionally. What I do think we'll deal with is when that happens again and again and again. And I don't have much patience for antisocial behaviour as being considered low level, a low level concern, low level crime. Because if you've got something going on outside your house every other night, day after day after day, and it's not dealt with, then it's a serious problem. Unfortunately, those incidents get extremely serious. And we've seen some terrible incidents in the past where somebody's gone to take on a set of young people and ended up being beaten to death or whatever else. So for me, it's low level, but it's an opportunity to get in early. It's an opportunity to find out what is required to help the individuals involved, but more importantly, know patients with ongoing repeat incidents of antisocial behaviour. Now, I'm hoping we'll talk a bit more about that because it's as much your responsibility as mine. Antisocial behaviour is an issue that we need to deal with as a partnership locally. We need to work as the police, as the council, and as housing associations in particular to resolve the issues. I think we can, but I think we need to be getting in earlier and having a lower tolerance. And the fourth one that has mentioned to me everywhere I went is road safety. Now, this very much depends on where you live. As to whether you're frightened just to step out of your front door because of speed or dangerous driving, or whether you're driving and it's part of your living and you see people on mobile phones on the motorway, or you're in commercial haulage and you see vehicles that aren't loaded properly or overloaded, or vehicles that aren't fit. 24 people died in Staffordshire last year as a result of road accidents. I think that's double the amount of people died from any other activity that came to the attention of the police. That's 24 families that have been absolutely destroyed. Far too often it's linked to speed. Far too often it's linked to drink driving, drug driving. And far too often the drivers aren't insured or taxed. So there's all sorts of opportunities for us to dramatically reduce harm in Staffordshire through improving road safety measures. If any of you get to meet my deputy, Helen, I'm sure you will do one day, Helen Fisher, she's absolutely full on with this, and we're going to be balancing more community speed watch to help people look after their own area, have a contribution in their own town, in their own village, with more engineering, more tactical road policing. Incredible how many incidents of criminality we find by pulling people over that aren't insured. So one of these automatic number plate recognition system will spot the car as it goes past. The police stop them. There's something nefarious going on. There might even be something in the boot of the car. Just seems to be a clear indication of problems. And when the county is so well served by transport, it becomes a target for county lines. Those sorts of operations, you need to cut them off at their using the transport links, which is why we work so hard with the West Midlands, not only on the motorways, but also to remove and reduce serious organised crime across the county. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a flavour for what was in the plan. If you've not said anything in the consultation, I'm going to take that as a big thumbs up. If you have, then thank you very much. A few things went in there directly as a result of it, which I really appreciated, actually, things that needed to be stated. Cybercrime, for example. Something which across the county we need a conversation about, which is illegal trespass and the difficulties some areas have had with travelling criminals. This is not gypsies and travellers looking to move across the county peacefully. This is people who are deliberately extorting as they travel across the county. So that needs a new approach. I hope the balance is right in the plan. I'm not asking the service to do anything that can't be done. And I think we'll see results within months and hopefully be one of the safest places in the country, and evidenced by inspections and so on by the end of my term in another 2.5 years. So some of that's going to play into what we're going to talk about now in Newcastle, I hope. Happy to take some questions, Chair.
I'm most concerned about police recruitment. You haven't particularly mentioned that. A lot of the things that you said sound good, but my understanding is that we're still very short of police. And I just wondered what your thoughts were about that, what you were going to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Yes, really important. Got some very good news on this. Over half of the 20,000 new police promised nationally have already been recruited. We're ahead of our recruitment target in Staffordshire. It'll take the number up about 20% over the 3-year period. That's well over 300 extra officers. And I'm really very pleased that I think in the country, we're leading in terms of the number of female recruits as well. 54% at the last set of figures I had. I think it's going to change the nature of the police service, you know. We're seeing some really capable young people, absolutely enthusiastic. And by the way, there's no shortage of people wanting to get in on this recruitment program, really high quality. But it's clear that we're going to have people that are perhaps more comfortable because they've grown up with it in the digital world, which so much of crime is involved, so much investigation now, so much exploitation and threat is online. I think they're ready and understand that. I think we'll see some real capable new additions into particularly investigation and forensics, things of that nature. But all of them have an ambition to be out on the streets doing the job in every way that they can. And the way that the training is working is they're getting a stint at almost every part of policing. There's a little bit of challenge around that because in the past, an officer would have come in and after quite a short period of training would be out there. Now it's a longer period, up to 2 years before they're operating independently, because they're coming from these various tasks to university and back as part of their training. But we're already seeing a lot of officers in now 18 months, 2 years that are becoming permanent parts of their chosen aspect of policing they want to start with. The others are coming through very quickly, and we're going to end up with a more rounded and more capable service than ever. So I'm quite encouraged. We'll get to about 1,950 officers within 18 months. I feel that's about the right amount. It's not as high as we've been in the past, but crime's quite different to how it was in the past. Very much less likely to suffer a burglary or a robbery or an incident in the high street now than we were 20 years ago. And that's partly why crime dropped so much, 10 years ago. But the new crime related to the internet, fraud, abuse, has taken the need for officers back up again. And the more we're involved in families and helping to identify and limit crime early, the more we need those officers out there alongside the PCSOs working in the communities. Thank you.
Councillor Cooper.
Good evening, Ben. Glad to see you back at working again. I've two questions. One question's already been answered. First question is the fire brigade. We used to check electric blankets for the older generation during the winter periods, is that still on? And if so, could it be advertised to let the elderly people know?
John, nice to see you too. I never stopped working, you know. It might have seemed like that, but I was still busy. I don't know whether we're checking electric blankets individually. I know part of the new targeted programme is very much to look at things like that when they're in the house of somebody they think is potentially vulnerable. So to checking of all the fire risks, but also safety risks, trip hazards, things of that nature. I know as councils in the past we've involved with that, the sloppy slippers campaigns. These things really matter because more people will die falling down the stairs than they will in a house fire, thank goodness. But also identifying other things like if they've got a car on the driveway, but you know they've got sight difficulties, asking a question about whether that's appropriate. Considering if people are needing support around other health issues, where the fire service can alert partners to the problem. So it's a wider scope of work than they did in the past, but hopefully more focused on people that are likely to need some assistance, haven't got family, haven't got others around them to help. Excuse me here, because I'm going to have a bit of a go at the number, but I think we still did about 4,000 safe and well visits last year, even during COVID. Now, that isn't the number that we've done before, and it probably won't be the number going forward with this new targeted approach. But I think it was still more visits even during COVID than most of the forces in the country. So we're still absolutely committed to prevention. And as you know, the Fire and Rescue Service would like nothing more than to never have to put a fire out again. By the way, the biggest issue in households is still related to cookery and faulty equipment. So anybody who's got I don't know, one of those 1-bar heaters that we all keep up in the loft and thinks it's cold enough to pull it down, perhaps don't do that. But if you do, check it very carefully before you do, because that's where the danger is still.
Thank you, Ben. The second question was, you tend to increase the response team for the police and also increase the staffing of the police. Does that mean, I said very nasty, does it mean in May you will be increasing the local police tax?
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. You're jumping ahead of me. I've got a meeting to talk about the budget with the panel in a week or so. There's an awful lot of work going on with the budget at the moment. I think we are likely to see some increase in the precept. I'm very keen to keep that as low as I possibly can. I need to really understand the numbers. Quite frankly, I won't put taxes up unless I think it's necessary. However, there's some real inflation at the moment. There's some wage inflation as well. The fire service had a wage increase that was not budgeted for this year. That had implications. The police have not had a wage rise for some time. And with the release now on the public sector pay freeze, I think it's time they did have a pay rise. So we're waiting on the final settlement from government, but I think some precept increase will be required. I'll go out to consultation in the next few weeks on that before Christmas, just to gauge the public's feel for the level, but it will not be significant. And as you know, we've still got extremely low council taxes here in Staffordshire right across the board.
Thank you, Ben.
Councillor Pan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. As a former police officer myself, I welcome the formation of these specialist units such as cybercrime, but you're taking a lot of people off the streets and out of uniform, which corrects the public image of the place that they want to see, and especially in rural areas sometimes when they don't even see a PCSO for days on end. What can we do about that?
Councillor Panther, thank you. Yeah, the nature of policing is changing, but I don't think we're going to get away from the reassurance of that visible policing, and it's very important that we get the structure as well as the numbers right. We may well have more officers in response, but actually the difference there is going to be on how response teams are located, how near to each area they are in terms of effectiveness. I think I'm very confident we're going to see a good proportion of these 300 odd extra police in our neighbourhoods, on our high streets, in our public places, and out in our rural communities. Well, we've got some significant challenges in the rural areas in reassuring people that they are responded to as well. And I was quite surprised. I looked at this very early. The response times to a rural incident is pretty much the same as an urban one. Now, whether that's because the roads are empty and in town, in city, the roads are blocked, I don't know. To be fair, the response times weren't as quick as I wanted them to be anyway for either. But I think that response matters, but also that neighbourhood policing in the sense that they understand the village community. I'm very aware that if there's a business crime, a rural crime, it tends to affect more than the immediate victim. You'll have a little supply chain around a business in a rural environment. Everybody gets knocked by it. So it's important. We've got some beautiful places, people coming to visit. There's policing, which was a challenge for the commander in the Moorlands last year, when suddenly everybody in the country wanted to visit Peak District. I can understand why, but if you lived there, it was quite a challenge managing some of that. And a real understanding of the local community matters. Now, you get that by walking around, meeting the community and working with them. So you will see more. Sorry, Chair, when was the question? You'll start to see them almost immediately, and you'll see some of the younger recruits out there already. But certainly 18 months, 2 years, it'll be noticeably different in those response and neighbourhood teams.
Councillor Waring.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commissioner. You mentioned in your plan that one of your priorities is road safety, and you were looking to do more with the community speed watch. Now, I've been involved with Michelle Shaker recently, and she's doing a cracking job. She does a fabulous job, but she's very stretched because she's got the whole of Staffordshire. And we're currently trying to set up a new community speed watch group in one area that I represent. And you just can't get the volunteers to do it. You know, you'll get 100 people on an action group or a Facebook page all complaining about speeding where they live. Yet if you mention to them, oh, you know, we're starting a new group here, why don't you join us? You just can't get the volunteers at all. I just wondered, are you putting any more resources into it? What kind of advertising are you doing? How can we encourage people to join one of these groups? You know, because their perception of speeding, I know personally, you get behind a radar gun and you do it yourself, and it's completely different. You could think they're going at 70 miles an hour and actually they're only doing 30. So the people that are complaining to me, I'm trying to get them to join the group so they can see this for themselves. Just can't get them to do it. Any ideas? Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Councillor Waring. We've got a number of ideas. I've just taken the chair of the Safer Roads Partnership. And Helen and I will be really looking to drive that exercise forward. We're keen to get some volunteers, not just to work in the at the front line there with the guns on their own, but also to have roads policing with them more often. There's a big motivation actually in having the service there alongside them. Notwithstanding, there's a bit of an attitude change in terms of the drivers thinking, right, that's not community speed watch, it's community speed watch with an officer who can ticket me as well. And it makes quite a big difference. But Michelle, you're right, does a terrific job. She's absolutely stretched. We have got, oh gosh, I can't remember the number, but we've got dozens. I think 70 or 80 groups at the moment. Our expectation is that we look to double that, but she's going to need some help too. So if you know anybody who is keen on assisting, doesn't necessarily want to work with the team with the radar gun, but would like to help Michelle organise Community Speedwatch in terms of setting up venues, training, dealing with the data as it comes back. We'll also be providing some new software to help automate a lot of that. Then we want to allow Michelle to use her expertise more widely and get more and more groups involved. So if anybody wants to volunteer on that basis, as a penchant for data or administration, we'd really appreciate them as contributing to the volunteering as well. And outside of that, if somebody would like to get involved volunteering around ethics, around policy decisions, around the way police do things like stop and search or use of force, we're also opening up some new opportunities for independent volunteers to help with that side of policing as well. Because I do appreciate it doesn't suit everybody, but I have been incredibly impressed with how many people do want to set up Speedwatch groups, and then they do it very enthusiastically. We're also thinking of allowing groups to work together. So 3 or 4 of you might go from village to village, town to town, rather than stick to your own locality. And that way we get a critical mass. It's good fun for a start, getting together like that, but that might allow us to cover more areas without requiring that number of people in each location. Watch this this space, Jill, because you'll see a lot more promotion of the Safer Roads Partnership. I'm very keen to change the way that we do the communication, that we bring all the information in from the roads policing unit, from the motorway policing group, into that one space, and we build up some impetus about this. It's not about more tickets necessarily. It's about changing people's behaviour and, where possible, educating. And by the way, there's going to be some cameras coming back, quite a number of them. I don't know where they are, so I can't tell you, but they will be back within the next few months in our most dangerous spots. And again, that's about saving lives.
Councillor Kieran.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Commissioner, for coming out to talk to us and listen to our questions tonight. When I heard that you were coming, and that you were going to answer questions, I asked residents in my ward to raise concerns that I could ask on their behalf. A number of the questions that came up time and time again, you've already talked about issues like antisocial behaviour in the town centre, particularly in and around the subways. So I'm going to focus on maybe some of the roads less travelled. We have a significant issue in my ward with antisocial parking, in fact, downright dangerous parking. So one of the issues that came up a lot, it came up from parish councillors, from residents groups, and just local residents. And I think it has been discussed in a recent panel, but the issue of a request, really, could you explore the possibilities and could you have a conversation with the incoming Chief Constable around the operational requirements? But it would be really helpful, I think, if PCSOs were to be given enhanced powers around on-street parking enforcement, and in particular, parking that breaches the highway code. There are a number of issues with quite dangerous parking in parts of my ward around the university campus. So anything that you could do around that, I think, would be very much appreciated. Another issue I've been asked about, which I'd not really thought about, but several people raised it, a number of concerns about safety on public transport, in particular bus services in and out of Hanley. And a number of residents whose sons and daughters in particular have had some quite unpleasant incidents on services in and out of Hanley, particularly sort of later in the evenings. Again, I wonder if you could, or if you have any plans to liaise with the bus operators around those issues, because there does seem to be an issue on services from Hanley to Newcastle and beyond to Keele. And then the final, which is more of a proper question, which I was asked by a few residents. What are your plans in terms of supporting services for young people, in particular activities for young people, as kind of diversion away from potential antisocial behaviour? And I think that's it.
Thanks, Councillor Kieran. The bus one, I'm going to look into that, because that is a new one to me, especially on a particular route. I'd really appreciate it if any of those individuals who've had that experience could drop me a line, and just perhaps with the nature of it, because I will definitely look into that. That isn't something that we've had that's come out on my my list in conversation. Dangerous parking. I agree with you. It is dangerous parking. It's not antisocial behaviour. Not antisocial behaviour. It's not just rude or impolite. Or if you're parked on a corner, if you're blocking people's driveways, if you're stopping people safely dropping off kids at school, things like that, it's dangerous. I'm already in a conversation with the incoming Chief Constable about a number of things, and I've mentioned that one. I think we're going to have a wider conversation about PCSOs. I know, like me, he's very concerned to retain the unique asset that the PCSOs have in that they develop these community relationships. I know some PCSOs would rather not be considered as liable to ticket in those situations. They see it as compromising their ability to build a relationship, to persuade, to encourage. However, I know that whilst most of us would think twice if a PCSO gave us the right stare and piece of advice, others see it as not having the teeth that's going to change their behaviour. So it's a conversation I'm having with him. I know the previous Chief Constable was not keen at all. He didn't want PCSOs to be managing street parking when they could be working in the schools, outside the schools, on playgrounds, on high streets, dealing with troubled families, and really providing that gel between some of the most vulnerable people and their services that they do the rest of the time. So there's a balance to be struck there. But I also appreciate this isn't civil parking. It's not parking on meters for too long and things like that. It's dangerous parking. So I'm happy to feed back on that when we get there. I should imagine in the new year we'll have a clearer view of how the chief sees PCSOs. Put it this way: if that's not the solution, I think we need to find one in terms of freeing up officer time, because that's the trade-off. At some point, these individuals need to have a real encouragement to change what they're doing. Now, with young people, it's absolutely key for me. I've been extraordinarily impressed with the SPACE programme that my predecessor resurrected across the county. This is a scheme, for those that don't know, for young people in the summer holidays. It involves council provision, all sorts of sports clubs, all sorts of activity providers across the county, quite often at very heavily subsidised rates, providing activities, diversionary activities for young people. We had a a good year this year, even despite COVID and a lot of these organisations being very unsure about what they could offer. But a lot of young people, thousands in fact, I've got a report, which again I'll share with you, Chair, if you don't mind, of this year's activity. That's going to be published any moment, in terms of the number of people that were engaged, and quite a lot of general provision. But really the key is provision for young people that, as I mentioned before, are on the edge of criminality, or they are troubled. They need mentoring. They need one-on-one support. There were some terrific examples. Some of the activities are just for 2 or 3 people. Canoeing. One young woman got involved with fishing. I didn't realise this was the love of her life. Fishing. She felt she was achieving something in a space she'd never considered before, and within weeks found something that really gave her a boost, gave her a sense that she was in control of her own destiny. And those one-on-one sessions, small group sessions, quite often where they're meeting other young people with similar challenges, it's really valuable. I went to one in Stafford where there was a boxing group, again of women actually, four young women boxing, for completely different reasons for being there. They could all fight in that ring. I was glad I wasn't anywhere near it. The fitness, the enthusiasm, the sense of self-control, and it was all part of, for them, of going on their next step to study, in one case, to very high level study. So I get this, it really does matter. The Commissioner's Office funds this, it funds the subsidies. A good portion of that money comes from proceeds of crime. So this is money's assets that we're taking back from criminals in Staffordshire. I can't think of a better way to use it, and I'm sure that the public would agree with that. Tony, I'd like to go a bit further than holiday cover, if I may. I'm looking at some options now as to how we might do that, working with some of the organisations that help volunteers groups who look after children to organise themselves, make sure they've got the right qualifications and the safety requirements that they need. They enable these groups to look after more young people. And I also wanted to hear more from young people around consultation, getting more widely involved in surveys. And I think you'll see a lot more of that in the next 6 to 12 months, because I'm quite determined, because I think it makes a big difference. And for what it's worth, I'm certainly going to expose myself to a few more groups of young people in universities and colleges and things like that. I had a good experience. I can see Councillor Holland looking concerned about that. I had a good experience with Stafford and Newcastle College the other day. There was a criminology group in Stafford. We talked about some difficult stuff. It was great to see them all determined to play their part in making the world a better place. So I won't have the level of expertise that you've got in that world, but I'll share some of my experience, and I think it all helps. The more young people we've got who see the police service as a positive friend to them through life, I think the better. Just on PCSOs, if I may, there was a cracker in the on Radio 4 about 5-6 weeks ago, right at the heart of the Sarah Everard issue with the case, and people's trust and confidence really knocked by that situation. And the interviewer asked two young women how they would feel if a police officer crossed the road to talk to them. And they said, "Oh, I'm not so sure about that at the moment. You hear all this on the news." And a friend chipped in, "Oh, well, yeah, not if it was Jeremy, the PCSO from school. You know, we've known him for 15 years. If it was Jeremy, we'd have a chat." And I thought that's exactly where we need to be. That relationship building with your neighbourhood officers, your PCSOs. It's so important. And that young woman was very comfortable saying, yeah, if I needed a hand, that's exactly who I'd go and talk to.
Councillor Ireland.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Commissioner, for being here this evening. I have an opinion to give on PCSO powers, which is probably that I lean towards giving them enhanced powers, specifically in relation to the issue that Councillor Kieran raised about parking ticketing, but also generally, I think if there is a public perception of PCSOs, it is that because they have less authority, they can be treated with less authority. And while opinions may differ among PCSOs themselves as to whether or not it would be appropriate or helpful for them to have enhanced powers in any particular situation, if the trade-off is indeed you have to find officer time to supplement that if you cannot get PCSOs to perform the tasks that you would like them to perform, then it seems to me to be a no-brainer that if you give them more authority, that doesn't necessarily take away from their ability to develop relationships with the community. And that, as you've said, is the foundation of neighbourhood policing. People respect their local bobby on the beat. People understand when they have a long-term relationship with their local police, that while those people do have the authority to handcuff them and lead them into the cells, they are also there to provide safety and reassurance. If I could probe a little bit further on rural policing, I know Councillor Proctor's not with us today, but if he was, he would probably pursue that line a bit further. He does represent a rural ward, I myself do not. But the issue, I think, in the rural area is that they have the same difficulty in obtaining police response that we do everywhere else, because 101 is severely pressurized. The emergency number is also under a great deal of use. And in addition to that, they simply do not see the police. You can't build a relationship with Jeremy or whatever his name is, the local Bobby, because he doesn't exist or you don't see him. And in the rural area, that's a real difficulty. I, working in this building, see a lot of the police because they happen to live here too. And in the town centre, we can sometimes not kid ourselves, but we can get the impression rightly that the police are active and that they're here locally. In the rural area, I do find, that is a recurring concern. People say, because we don't have that, it's very difficult. And you said that you have confidence that that's going to improve. What changes are you making, or what changes are you encouraging to the neighbourhood policing model that will guarantee that? And how do you hope that you'll be able to work with the Chief Constable incoming in order to make sure that people see those benefits and feel that there is a real change being made, particularly in the rural area? I know other councillors may have personal experiences to chip in. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holland. I've seen a lot of police here as well. In fact, last time I was here, they just raided a house full of cannabis. You probably smelt it if you were in the building 2 weeks ago. 300 grand's worth apparently in 3 big sacks. So they were delighted at the result. Phil Duffy here, your commander, who's excellent, by the way, would tell you that he would like to be able to put more officers visibly in the town centre. He's doing a good job with that, but he'd like to do more. He'd like to put more officers out and about so they can have a regular visit to some towns and villages. And it's interesting, this. You can live in places and not see a police officer, even though there's one there every day. It depends on your life pattern. It depends on where you are and when. So having a regular presence or an opportunity to go and engage with an officer, I think, is quite important. There are ways in which you can feel connected without necessarily having that uniform walk past your front window every day. And I think we can get smarter at that. I think we can certainly get smarter in today's age with digital communication and personally staying in touch with people. And one of the things in the plan is a commitment that we will make it easier for you to get in touch and stay in touch with your local police and PCSO. And I think that's important. Ultimately, we aren't going to get to the point where there will be hundreds and hundreds of officers patrolling, looking for incidents or hopefully deterring incidents. What we will do is see dozens more over the next few years. I think if they do that intelligently in the right places, where there's markets, where there's opportunities, outside the supermarkets, outside the local stores, then they'll have that opportunity for engagement and reassurance. And it is reassurance for a lot of people. It's to be able to say, look, I'm fine, but I'm worried about so-and-so. Is that all okay over there? Or I'm not fine because something's happening around the back of me every other night. Can you just check it out? And I think that's the nature of local response that we want to see. Phil Duffy will have an opportunity to do that more if we get this operating model right. It has been a quite extraordinary period, notwithstanding the pandemic. We sent over 120 officers to COP26 for the event up in Glasgow. That's a huge number of the daily shift. There was the G7 down in Cornwall. Dozens went there. At the minute, your command team here is down on neighbourhood numbers because they are assisting the response team. Now that is because of the big demand that we've had on calls recently, but also because that model is not working as effectively as we want. So this isn't just about changing where people are located, how they're located, how they're led. It's about freeing up the capacity of the neighbourhood teams again. And it's going to take a few weeks and months to get that right, but it will mean that a local commander, I expect, I'm not the Chief Constable, I can't speak for him, but I expect that he will want to be giving more authority back to his local commander as to how he uses his response teams, how he uses his neighbourhood teams, and the reach he has into the roads policing to make sure that he's got the capacity that when there's something on in town, when there's something on in a village, plus those regular engagement events, he can manage that. That's what they want. It's what they all want. And I think for the right reasons, they ought to get that, really. It'll never be Dixon or Dock Green again. It'll never be a patrol. I was speaking to an officer just before the election who used to work in Birmingham, long retired, absolutely fascinating chat. It was before Panda cars, and he was telling me how he had where was it, Kitts Green or somewhere like that, south of Birmingham. His patrol route would be organised so that he would pass a telephone box at a certain time every couple of hours, because he would call in for his tasks and duties for the next 2 hours. He'd be alerted to something if it had happened, and then he'd spend the next 2 hours doing his patrol to get to the next phone box to find out what. He said when Panda cars came in and suddenly you didn't have to be on the patch to respond to something, it was like a revolutionary change. Now, I'm afraid we've accelerated a bit from there, and there's a risk we lose that value of visibility and engagement, but we do want to keep it.
Councillor Owen.
Thank you, Chair. I think Mr. Adams has just answered all the questions I've written down here, so no further questions. Thank you.
Anyone else? Right, I've got one for you then. It goes very much along the traffic side again. Yeah. We have a zebra crossing, which was the most policed zebra crossing in Staffordshire when it got there. it's now used as a parking bay. We have so many complaints about it, and the biggest complaint is police car goes past, it doesn't stop. They're parked on the zebra crossing. Now, it could be on a call, it could be doing a lot more things, but the public just see it going past, and the zebra crossings used as a car park. Can we have a little bit of a response? And on your thing about getting people seeing police, a few years ago when I did have a shop in the village, we actually had the PSOs that used to come in and sign a book, say that they'd been there, and they used to be able to pick anything, information up that people had left them, and they'd sign for that as well. And when they used to have the police surgeries and they say, oh no, we haven't seen a policeman or anybody for X amount of time, they'd actually got it a written proof that they'd been around 3 times a week. It's just that the people who didn't see him weren't in the right place.
Thank you for that. Chairman, would you mind passing me the details of where that zebra crossing is?
After the event?
Not now, drop me a line.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Jill.
I'm assuming it's me.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's you.
Thank you. All right. So thank you for coming tonight. Most of the things that I would have probably raised have already been raised. I would say, though, I'm glad it is a priority with the operating model, looking at the reporting response issues, because I think that if things change with that, that might encourage people to report incidents more promptly. We have a huge underreporting issue in the town, and though there's a lot of grumbling about antisocial behaviour and various things, it is about encouraging people to report. So if there's any other ways of reporting, like the police Facebook page, and actually reporting it to the council, that might help the police as well, so that it raises, if you like, the incidents that we're aware of.
Thank Chair, if I may. Thanks, Councillor Heeson. That we really need to hear about people's concerns, and I do appreciate if you're waiting a long time on the phone, sometimes you're not going to hang on. The digital 101 option works very well. You can either do a formal report, or you can do a sort of Facebook type social media connection. I know somebody reported an attempted break-in. They didn't need to see the police instantly, and they weren't concerned. So it worked very well for them to be able to make a report the next day, and they had an exchange of email messages, and it was what they needed. I think younger people in particular are going to find that as their preferred way of making contact. Actually, it does concern me sometimes, because I have seen some exchanges on Facebook and on Twitter, which I would deem 999 emergencies. And dial 999 if it's an emergency, is my plea. Don't look to social media to make that. But if you're prepared to wait a couple of hours, wait half a day for something, then why not? We all do it with our banks. We don't expect to speak to somebody at 11 o'clock at night when it's not necessary. But the trust thing is very important. If you're not having your phone call answered, if you're not having your communication responded to, if you're not necessarily being advised of where your case is in the wider system, if somebody isn't phoning up to say, I hear you're a victim of crime, what can we do to help? Then those are all opportunities to build up trust that are being missed. And I think we need to get that right. If we trust the police, report the incidents, the work I'm looking to do around ASB will be very much based around repeat incidents. The more calls, the more reports, the more solid evidence the service have, the more they can deal with those incidents effectively. It isn't enough for something to be known on Facebook but not formally recorded. So thank you for that.
Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say thank you to Ben for calling. I think he's been information been excellent, and you've answered the questions exactly as I wanted to. You gave me the information I need. So just thank you very much for being here, Ben.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ben. Can I just ask one more question? You mentioned the Crown Prosecution Service, which is in an absolutely horrendous state at the moment, as you well know. And I think the fact that it's taking 2 years for some cases to come to court is just absolutely horrendous for the people involved, especially if they've not done anything wrong. You've said that you're going to be working hard to improve how it works, and you're working with partners. Have you started that process yet? And how long do you think it will take before we do see any changes? Thank you.
Yes, I wouldn't go so far as to say the service is horrendous in that sense. Actually, the individuals I've been working with in the county are really very committed people. Quite often, the process of bringing a charge, which the Crown Prosecution Service is primarily involved with, that can be delayed. It might be months. The key delay then in getting seen in court is then the court backlog, the court bottleneck. Yeah, as Commissioner, I chair a group called the Local Criminal Justice Board, and I get an opportunity to talk with our court, probation, prisons, and CPS reps, and that's magistrates and Crown courts. We meet regularly. I don't think we've done enough with those meetings in the past. This is relatively new, couple of years in. The obligation around that meeting, and unlike police and fire for me, I don't have direct influence in quite the way I do there. It's an opportunity to convene, and it's about the sort of work that we've always done as councils, really, trying to come to a shared understanding about things and move relationships forward. And I think we've got a long way further on with that in recent months, but there's further to go. There's quite a lot of data sharing that needs to improve. There's quite a lot of consistency, like, for example, the experience of a victim through the process. We've got a very clear idea, thanks to the focus on victims with commissioners and recent laws, about how the police deal with a victim, and you get a lot of feedback in terms of surveys and so on. That information can fall off very dramatically in court cases, to the extent that far too often victims' experience statements aren't presented in courts when they should be. They have a significant impact on sentencing. So I think there's a lot we can do around 3 or 4 organisations that have been quite used to working on their own in the past, accountable to the Ministry of Justice, working more as a team and recognising that the individual in that system is one person who's distressed, had a terrible incident. Maybe they're a witness and they're coming forward with all the right intention, and they need to be looked after through the whole process. And I've got to be really clear, I think, about how we can improve, and then set some clear examples around it. I'd like to see more restorative justice. This is where criminals and victims get to talk about their circumstances. I'd like to see more of these treatment orders, because I think in some cases people are waiting several months for a court case when they already could have had treatment, which is in many cases far more likely to prevent a domestic violence incident, for example. So I think there are opportunities across the whole system. And with probation, already seen big improvements with the way they engage with people leaving prison several weeks or months before they leave, rather than after they've left the back door. And they're lining up accommodation, jobs, reconnecting with families, things like that going forward, which all means a massive reduction in reoffending in those first few weeks and months after people leave prison. So as a whole, it's a big world, that is, and I'm not going to make any promises, but I'm pretty determined to give it a real go. They're all extremely capable professional people. It's about us all recognising we've got a shared interest, and let's remember we're looking after the public and victims and see if we can improve some of this stuff.
Any more questions before we can say thank you to Ben? Oh, okay. No, big silence for you. So thank you for coming. Thank you for answering the questions. And hopefully we won't give you too much of an headache.
No, I'll come again, Chairman, if I may.
It's always open.
Thank you.
Right, back to the agenda. Minutes of Staffordshire Health and Care Overview and Scrutiny Meeting, page 21 to 24. Any questions? Or just take it as read? Okay, can I have a take it as read? Okay. Okay. Update on health impact from Wallis Quarry. Right. Who's doing that one? Silence. Just a brief update on that one from the Staffordshire side, as it's going to be brought in. It will be brought back to the county in March. They're looking at that, so we were saying today to see how far it's actually gone ahead. You will be having, or you should be getting the fortnightly reports that I get. I do send them on to you, so hopefully you're getting them. Has anybody got anything to say, Councillor Holland?
Yes, we did benefit earlier on in the process from the visit to this room of the committee at which it held some of its deliberations. I think it is important, if it's possible for you as chair of this committee to represent to the county, that it is important that they continue to have a watching brief on it, and that they continue to meet and to discuss and to apply pressure to the various public bodies that they work with as partners. That is as essential as the work that we're doing as a borough council is towards finding a resolution to the problems over at Wallis Quarry.
Yeah, they have fortnightly reports, and then, like I say, it's coming into March for a full report on the health side of it. There was something stated today, but unfortunately it wasn't on the health side, and that's all that we'd be interested in. Anything else? Anybody else know? Okay.
Just there is the member engagement event tomorrow that all members can attend in person here or on Zoom. The details have been sent out, so that will be extra information for anyone who wants it. Thank you.
My apologies for that meeting straight away, because I'll be at Staffordshire. I'll be in Stoke. Meeting with the Clinical Commission Group, page 25. Again, I missed that one because I was at Stafford, that one. Any questions, or do we take it as read? As read? Okay. Work programme.
For the next meeting, Chair's the 7th of March. You wanted to focus on the housing advice service. Now it's come in-house. Ben Adams did talk about the report on the space programme, whether you wanted that to come back to your next meeting as well, perhaps? Just the Newcastle Housing Advice Service is already on your work programme for next time. But other than that, a general item on how services managed with winter pressures, and then your regular items. Thanks, Chair.
So we can put space on that if you want space on, or has anybody got anything else that they'd like to put forward for that meeting? We'll have space.
Sorry, Chair, I was only going to say that meeting will be the last regular meeting of this committee before the all-out elections, and therefore the last meeting of this committee in its current configuration. But many of us will continue indefinitely in the future, I'm sure.
Does that mean you want a quicker meeting? Any public questions? And seeing if we've only got one member of the public that's here representing the public. Councillor Sweeney, or Mr. Sweeney. Any urgent business? Next meeting then, Monday the 7th of March. Closer. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. Okay. Have a happy Christmas and a good Christmas. I keep forgetting about that. You know, I'm working, so it's not Christmas.